Hello there, welcome to the Money Tea. Today we'll be talking about economic justice for Black America. I am recording this because there's a recent study by Yale University that shows that the majority of Americans, like mostly white Americans, actually underestimate just how much inequality exists between white and Black Americans. Basically, many people think that Black Americans make a lot more or have accumulated a lot more wealth than is actually the truth. Sadly, many people just overestimate how much progress has been made in the country. Let me give you some facts. Did you know that Black Americans are the only racial group to make less today than they did in the year 2000? How about this? For every $100 that a white American family has accumulated, a Black American family has only accumulated $5 and some cents. This same gap has existed for over 50 years. How about this? If current policies aren't changed, it will take an average Black American family 228 years in order for them to accumulate the same amount of wealth as a white American family today. People often forget that the majority of Americans didn't just become homeowners by accident or by working hard. It was actually through federal policies in the 1940s that created a lot of opportunities for many people to become homeowners. As you can imagine, a lot of these policies were particularly in favor of white Americans, and the flip side of that is that they discriminated against minority groups, especially African Americans. One such policy is redlining. Redlining refers to how lenders identified and referenced neighborhoods that they considered to have a great share of people that were most likely to default on their mortgages. So this was a government-sponsored policy, and what happened is that lenders will grab like a red pen and will go on a map of any particular cities, and through that map they will draw lines showcasing neighborhoods that had people that were most likely to default on loans. And at the same time, they'll also single out neighborhoods that had more favorable type of people. And as you can imagine, the neighborhoods with people most likely to default on loans just so happen to be minority Black American areas. So for many years, a lot of US banks denied loans to people living in these neighborhoods. As a result, that they were not able to buy their own houses or even renovate some of the properties that they had. In 1968, the Fair Housing Act was passed in order to prohibit lending discrimination. And in 1977, the Community Reinvestment Act was also passed. All these laws ban discrimination based on someone's race when they're trying to either rent a place or buy a house or apply for a mortgage. Did you know that 3 out of 4 neighborhoods, that is 75% of neighborhoods that were redlined in the 1930s, continue to struggle today? Take Baltimore, for example, one of the earliest cities to adopt redlining. Did you know that almost all neighborhoods that were considered hazardous in the 1930s in Baltimore continue to struggle economically today? The only exceptions are the areas surrounding Baltimore Harbor, which have been developed in order to attract businesses. There was a study in 2015 that showed that for Baltimore, race and not income continues to be the main determinant of whether someone gets a loan or not. This study showed that banks made almost twice as many loans to white people than it did to Black people in Baltimore. In case you didn't know, for most American families, the largest asset is the house that they own. In fact, home equity makes up 2/3 of household wealth. So you're probably in a situation where your parents have owned your house and they've paid down the mortgage on your house or close to paying it down. So one day when you inherit your house, you'll inherit it without any debt. And if you want, you can sell that house and get that money. So what happens to most Black Americans is that there isn't even a house to pass down from one generation to another. And as a result, you can't pass down wealth from one generation to the next. As a result of all of this, you find that Black Americans are continuously trapped in poor neighborhoods with low quality schools and services. All of this which make it very hard for upward social mobility. So what can be done about this? So home ownership is traditionally the way to build generational wealth, and it needs to be more accessible to Black Americans. So a way to do this will be to expand down payment assistance programs, thus making it sure that more and more Black Americans are able to afford homes. Another way will be to enforce fair lending laws. Also reducing foreclosure and eviction rates, but also increasing the number of affordable housing units. Well, they can't because of credit score discrimination. Now, because of a lot of people living in redline zones had no access to mortgages and loans, as a result, a lot of neighborhoods fell into foreclosure crises, as well as there was the recession that affected the country, and there was general unemployment across the country. So say, for example, someone loses their job, then they probably have to get a payday loan so that they don't have to be evicted. They'll also lose insurance, and as a result may not be able to pay some medical bills. Have credit card debt, like unpaid medical debt, student loans, like evictions, like foreclosures, like bankruptcies. All of these contribute towards a credit score that someone has. In fact, did you know that almost half of Black Americans carry medical debt on their credit cards? So this same credit information is then used to make hiring decisions, to rent an apartment, to get insurance, to buy a car, to buy a house. So as you can see, this is a clear way of perpetual inequality and poverty. So policies that can be used to mitigate this is that credit scoring companies need to reevaluate the metrics that they use in order to assign credit scores to Black Americans, and expand the scoring metrics such that more Black Americans are able to have access to good credit. Another way of building generational wealth is through the ownership of businesses that can be passed down through family. At present, there are roughly 2 million Black-owned businesses around America. Sadly, of these 2 million Black-owned businesses, 1.9 million Black-owned businesses just have one employee. Now imagine if these businesses were able to hire 1 or 2 more employees. It will do wonders to the Black unemployment rate. So the answer varies depending on who you ask, but most people agree that racism, discrimination, as well as unfair lending laws all plays a huge role into ensuring that there aren't that many Black-owned businesses. Another factor is that there's a lack of business resources in Black American neighborhoods. It leads to a lack of education on how to start and build successful businesses. So what can be done is that there need to be policies to boost Black-owned businesses. There needs to be an expansion of mentorship and incubators. There needs to be a greater access to capital. And there also needs to be expanded procurement from Black-owned businesses. So basically policies that expands and also spurs a creation of Black-owned businesses. So let me tell you a little story about the Greenwood District. In the 1920s, there was the Greenwood District in Tulsa, Oklahoma. This was an affluent neighborhood that was called the Black Wall Street. The community had over 300 Black-owned businesses. Everything from doctors to pharmacists to pilots, like the works, it was all there. What happens is one day there was a 19-year-old Black boy called Dick Rowland who happened to take an elevator where there was a white 17-year-old girl called Sarah Page. As Dick was getting off the elevator, he tripped and fell, and as he was falling, he grabbed Sarah's arm. She screamed. So when the elevator doors opened, Dick ran, and then Sarah claimed that she was assaulted. But she didn't press any charges. However, the people that were standing nearby decided to press charges. So by the end of the day, rumor was that Dick raped Sarah. So you had a group of white and Black men that were confronting each other outside the courthouse where Dick was held. And of course, the Black Americans were outnumbered. So what they did is that they retreated to the Greenwood District. And what happened is that by the next day, the white mob went around looting and burning the Greenwood District. In a span of 24 hours, 35 square blocks were burned, and as much as 1,200 houses were completely destroyed. So many people lost their lives, like up to 300 people died. The Greenwood District is just one example of the historical discrimination and destruction of Black wealth in America. So what we need are policies that help create generational wealth as well as economic empowerment for Black Americans. There needs to be economic justice for Black America. And that, my friends, is a tea of the day.